Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Hess. Thank you for meeting with me today. Yes, you must be exhausted from your trip. Did you enjoy it? Oh yeah, I love Europe. I've been there many times. Love the trains, I love the history, I love everything about Europe. Yep. Did you bring the grandkids? Oh, they must have had a great time. Yeah. Yes, I have two. I have two grandsons. They were up this last weekend. We were teaching them how to fish and ride the tractors, and we ran them around pretty good. They crashed at 6 p.m. Grandparents crashed at 7. So grandkids are fine. They're great. It's even better at the end of the day. You can give them back to the parents and you can go to bed. So, but yes, we've had. I love my grandkids, and we take care of them pretty well. They get spoiled, just like I'm sure you spoil yours. In any case, thank you so much for coming in today and talking about your financial plan. I have sent you the details of that. Today, I don't want to spend or wade into the minutia of the numbers. We're going to stay fairly high level. I want to review your goals, talk about some of the points that we see in this plan that I think are important to talk about, and make sure that you're comfortable going forward. So this financial plan it's a launching point. It's a living document. It's going to change over time. It'll probably change every year, if not more currently or presently. And that's good. That's what it should be. We want to make sure we keep up with changes and things that happen, and make sure we're flexible to meet all of the goals that you have outlined. All right, so your particular goals you gave us, we're talking about 4 main goals. Reducing any gift state tax liability, and making sure you had all your planning documents in place. Reviewing the insurance contracts that you have in place. Reducing your personal taxes, which are substantial presently. And then recommending some kind of diversified portfolio to work on your stocks and investments that you currently hold. Are those still correct? Those still your goals? Great. I noticed specifically, though, that you did not mention anything about passing on a legacy or anything like that. Have you talked about what you wish to leave your children or anything? Yes? Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Again, your goals will change over time. This is not on the forefront of your mind right now, but it might be in the near future. So I just want to make sure we talk about those things and make sure we cover whatever you need to get covered. Okay. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to take some notes because I am no longer a spring chicken, so I am going to take notes as we go. Please forgive me. I hope that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Obviously, you're in great financial shape right now. You're in the highest tax bracket. I do feel urgency in 2 specific areas, your risk management and your estate planning. I definitely feel urgency. I want to share that with you when we get to those items. And I think we can help a lot in your goals and making this a lot more advantageous to you going forward. All right, so we're gonna cover 5 basic areas that I want to make sure that you understand. That the risk management, which is your insurance mostly, your investments, your retirement, your taxes, and then estate planning. And we'll wrap it up with the recommendations, the high-level recommendations on how we go forward. Does that sound good to you? Great. All right, let's talk about risk management. And this is my first area where I feel some urgency. Now, we live in a very litigious society, you know that, and wealthy people can be targeted more than lesser financially off people. And I notice immediately that you have no umbrella policy to cover your assets. Have you talked about this? Your agent should mention it to you, and it's something that I would recommend. First thing out of the box here is to get an umbrella policy. And the umbrella policy will cover liability holes for anything that you have insured, your home, your car, your boat, which is not presently insured. We'll talk about that. But if someone fell or you got into a car accident and you get sued for $5 million, your policy, your car policy, would only stop at, I think currently at $300,000 or $600,000. And if the the lawsuits are $5 million, you have no coverage there, and it would come out of your personal assets. In the true insurance vernacular, umbrella insurance is cheap insurance. It has fantastic coverage, it's very inexpensive, and fills in holes beautifully. If you keep that policy with your current auto policies, whereas with your same agent, they work hand in hand, and it's something I strongly recommend. I would also note that you have differing deductibles for each of your plans. You have a $1,500 deductible in some of your auto, some in $500 in your auto, $1,500 in your house, and so forth. You have the ability to absorb a $1,000 loss easily with your financial situation. So I would recommend that you kind of move all of your deductibles to at least $1,000. For your auto policy, you'll get back any risk of loss by the lower price on the policies, which are pretty substantial. And then for your home, I would recommend at least $1,000 deductible. You can go as high as $5,000 or higher if you wanted to, but $1,000 is probably very comfortable and would be covering you pretty well. Your primary home, which I believe is your only home that is in a flood zone, has no flood insurance. Were you aware of that? Your agent can help you get this. You may have to go to the federal flood insurance program to get coverage, but it's something that we would strongly recommend. Okay? All right, your stamp. I'm going to talk a little bit more about your stamp later on, but your stamp has no coverage, correct? And it's probably because you feel like it's pretty safe and secure. Is it in a safe deposit box or something? It's okay. Something that's almost $1.2 million in value, something we would recommend that you get a policy. You can probably hang it off your home insurance policy. It is a collectible, so it will have substantial cost. It'll probably be more than $10,000 for that coverage, but this is something of great value that you think is going to continue to grow. It's an investment that coverage might be very important to you to consider. All right, then we looked at your Medicare coverage. You've got A, B, and D. It would be wise probably to look at maybe two other things. A Medigap plan would help fill in any holes that Medicare doesn't cover through A, B, and D. And you probably have heard about Medicare Advantage plans, which are offered by private insurance companies. Those plans they're paid, those companies are paid directly by Medicare, so they have very strong incentives to sign people up and take care of them, and there are some very large advantages and disadvantages, but large advantages to using the Medicare Advantage plan. It's something we would recommend you take a look at as well. Long-term care, the plans are inexpensive at this point, relatively speaking for you. If we did for 10 years, it might cost you $10,000 a year for both of you, approximately. And so for 10 years, you're about $100,000 investment. Long-term care might run you $250,000 a year. So you can see that if something happened over that decade, it would be something that would pay for itself pretty quickly. However, you're both in excellent health, and you may not need this long-term care into your 80s or maybe even your 90s. You have the ability, if something happened today, to pay for your own long-term care out of your own assets. And that might be something you want to think about, because the long-term care policies, if you sign up now, they're cheaper, of course, but you have the ability to get through a fair number of years without having to worry about insurance. And if you don't need it for 20 years from now, that'd be approximately a $200,000 investment in policies that you never used. So we have to look at that and kind of balance off those trade-offs, and it's something I want to talk to you more about. Make sense? Okay. And your life insurance, you don't need any further life insurance. Some people might say that you do. I would disagree. Your life insurance coverage is plenty. You've got more than enough assets. You don't have any debts, really. So the life insurance is, there's no further needs there. Okay, so you can see my urgency around the risk management. let's move on to investments. All right, so the sale of your business for the next 7 years, these installment payments are going to be approximately $428,000 a year, which is more than enough to cover what your income and expenses are. Your expenses, my apologies. And so that leaves your entire investment portfolio open to maybe more risk, which you said you were open to taking advantage of, and also being able to grow it without having to have any kind of tax consequences if we pick out the right investments. So first off, where you sit from a cash flow standpoint for at least the next 7 years gives us, in a fairly good horizon. In 7 years, the markets might do funky things, but you still have the ability to absorb a lot of those things and come out way ahead in the 8th year when you need different kind of funding when the installment loan is gone. So we want to talk more about how we mix that portfolio up for you and how we get ready for it. The current portfolio, your stocks have not performed very well. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but some of these, your stocks, obviously have a large loss with stock A, but you also have B, C, and D have all returned 2%, 3%, and less than 1% relative here, and I think that's we can do much better than that. The market's obviously performing much better than that, and so between the portfolio mix you have, which is very small, it's not very diversified, and the fact that those stocks aren't doing very, very well, I think we can do a lot better with a different strategy there. Same thing for, I'm not sure also if you're aware, your 401k, your mutual funds, and another fund had big mutual fund portfolios, and that actually, some of those funds, I believe, have tobacco stocks in them. You may not be aware of that because unless you read the 10,000-page documents from the mutual funds, you will not be able to find out what's in them. But I suspect there are some, in fact, tobacco stocks in there. So that is a concern of yours. I think we can look into it more closely and diversify away from that. Also, your CDs. I understand why the CDs are there and why you did it, John, when you sold the business. But are those all at the same bank? Okay. As you may have heard recently, the FDIC has been squeezed by some of these regional banks that have suffered losses from run on deposits. And the FDIC only insures you up to $250,000 per person per bank. So even if you had 3 of those CDs totaling $800,000 at one bank, you're still only covered for $250,000. So we absolutely should look at diversifying the CD holding. If you want to keep the CDs, we should at least look at moving them into different banks so that it's a small risk, but why take it? We can avoid it pretty easily, okay? All right, clearly your stamp to sell or not is a big deal, and the stamp is a very unique issue. And I'll tell you that I used to work at an auctioneer in Massachusetts, Skinner Auctioneer, and I used to work there in summers in college, and I saw a lot of collectibles like this come through. And back then, Skinner charged a 10% buyer fee and a 10% seller fee, and you could also do it so it was just a seller or a buyer fee. But generally speaking, it was about 15%, either 10 on 10 or 15 on one side. So I use 15% to plug into this, and if you wanted to sell this, just wanted to throw you some numbers here. If you sold this in 10 years, and in fact it was worth $2.5 million or so, the commission and the tax, now this would be capital gains tax, but it's a collectible. So the collectible tax, capital gains tax is 28%. So between the 28% capital gains tax and the commission, it's almost $1 million in fees and taxes you would pay. So of the 2.5 million, you'd get a little bit more than 1.5 million, and that is quite a hit. So I wanted to share that with you because it may go, we'll have another conversation about this in a second, but it may go into your thinking about whether you keep this or sell it in the future. And again, I'll talk to you about that more in a second here. That plugs directly into this, your investments passing along your estate. Instead of gifting, you can gift now, as I'm sure you're thinking about, as you mentioned here in one of your goals, but also the fact that when you gift, if you stay within the exemption limits, then you're fine. But if you go beyond that, then we start having to track all that on a tax form, and there are some tax consequences later, depending on how close we come to those state tax exemptions. My concern here is that, or my suggestion here is that, if you're not aware of this, the more that we can send your estates and pass them through your will to heirs, those heirs will collect a new basis, what's called a stepped-up basis for your assets, and they will become, if your estate grows to $20 million and you pass it all off to your heirs, they will now get a stepped-up basis of $20,000. It won't be what you paid for them; it'll be what that estate is worth at the time of your passing. So that is a huge tax break for your heirs, if that's important to you. But it's something to think about in case you weren't aware of that. Make sense? Okay. All right, so all that said, let's shift into your retirement part of your asset portfolio. Obviously, your installment needs for the next, your income needs for the next 7 years will be met by your installment sale payments. And so that gives us some little leeway here. So in the meantime, I'm thinking very strongly that we need to convert your 401k, John, and Mary, your 403b into IRAs, and then that allows us to do a couple other things that we'll talk about in the tax part of this conversation. And I think it'll be something right now that we can also designate beneficiaries. Right now, your beneficiaries are your estates and not each other, which means they'll go through probate. And we're going to talk about probate in a minute. But clearly, anything we can do to avoid probate will be helpful. And I'll come back to that in a second. The other part of this is that with your financial situation being so strong, we do have a nice recommendation or strong recommendation to roll your current IRAs in a step basis. Once we get a better control of your tax situation and how we can reduce those taxes, once we get there, we should start thinking about a stepped process of rolling your IRAs into a Roth IRA. The Roth IRA will help us dramatically so we can avoid required minimum distributions, John, which you'll be facing in 2 years at 73. And they're also, once you get into a Roth, all that money is tax-free forever, including your heirs. So it's a very, very powerful instrument, certainly one of the most powerful instruments that the government has given us. So we want to take advantage of those if we can. So clearly, there are some tax consequences to all this, and clearly that's one of your most important things. Your tax bill last year this year is going to be quite substantial, and I think we can do a lot of very interesting things that'll help you with this. Clearly, your current dividends and income from that portfolio, we can move a lot of that into municipal bond funds, which will produce tax-free income for you. We can also structure your investments such that they are more in a growth phase than a income-producing phase. In the growth phase, if they're not kicking out a lot of dividends and they're just growing, then we're talking about capital gains tax longer term, and that's the kind of stuff we can do over the next 7 years while you're living off this installment sale. I think it can be a very powerful way to grow your portfolio and get it ready to convert to a much more conservative one at the time that you need cash after the installment sale income is gone. On top of that, you should think about a 529 for the kids, your grandchildren. If you haven't talked about that, are you familiar with the 529? The 529 is another fantastic vehicle for education. If it's used, the only drawback is it has to be used for education. So if the grandkids are going to go to college, you can fund 529s. That money grows tax-free for them. You can keep it in your name. If they want to apply or get a scholarship, if you keep it in your name, it will not show up on any of those applications for financial aid or anything like that. And then you can fund their colleges, a college education directly from the 529. It's a very, very, very powerful vehicle. The only drawback is if they don't go to school, they decide to become a truck driver, then the money gonna have to move. Now, you do have the ability to move 529s from child to child or to other persons to other persons. So it's a great flexible tool and something we should think about, okay? All right, then two last things. We are also gonna suggest we harvest some of those losses in your stock portfolio, as we talked about earlier. That'll give us losses against some of your gains and allow us to diversify your portfolio without incurring any kind of large expenses and tax hits. And then also one of the great tools we can also use, once you convert your 401k, John, to an IRA, we can fund a QCD. It's a qualified charitable distribution trust. It's basically all of your RMD money that's required when you turn 73. When that money comes to you as a required minimum distribution, it can go directly into your QCD, and you don't have to pay any income tax on that income that you pulled out of your IRA. It's a very powerful tool. Your charity gets something out of it, you get something out of it. Again, these are the kind of things that your estate attorney will be able to help you with pretty dramatically. Taxes are pretty complicated, so I understand if it gets confusing, but does that help you right now? Give you something to think about? Okay. All right, so the last big item I want to talk to you about is estate planning, and this is where I also feel a lot of urgency. You have got an enormous amount of assets in each name, in each personal name, and those assets will have to go to probate. Yes, probate. Yes, probate's it's like standing in line at the DMV, right? Only you're surrounded by lawyers. It's day at the beach. And even though you're in the DMV line and you're waiting, and it feels like you're waiting for months in the probate court, it is months. It could be longer than months. And anything you can do to avoid probate will save the enormous amount of money that probate court can cost, and especially with your assets, it's going to be a very lengthy time in the courts. And the amount of pain that it imparts on heirs is also substantial. So to make this much cleaner, anything we can do immediately to get all the accounts that are either in John or Mary's name, put them in joint tenants with survivorship, so that if something happens, the other person doesn't have to go through probate on that. But on top of that, the most important thing will be that your estate attorney, if you have one, and if you don't, we can make recommendations for them. But the estate attorney, for you especially, is going to be one of your most important people. Now, you're coming to us. I will be your quarterback for all these plans that come together. But the estate attorney may be the most important one for you folks, because you've got substantial assets, and a good estate attorney will be able to help you with properly setting up your estate, moving things out of your estate into trusts, making sure that income is still coming in for you, but making sure we can avoid all the probate and all the kind of pain that comes with not having them set up correctly. So right now you don't have any kind of estate tax that's going to be required. You're under that, but our current estate exemption is going to sunset in 2025, and it will go back, and you will in fact be very possibly exposed to the tax exemption limit, the estate tax exemption limit. So I'm going to really strongly recommend that we get in front of an estate attorney as soon as possible. You're also missing no power of attorney documents or healthcare directives. If something horrible happened, you would need to have some power of attorney so you could make decisions on each other's behalves. Healthcare directive spells out what you want to do if something catastrophic happened to you. It would tell anybody there, including doctors, what you wanted to happen. So those things should be done immediately as well. And then, of course, your life insurance assets are fantastic vehicles, so we can move into things like life insurance trusts as well. That will reduce your estate and also set up a much better way to handle the flow of money when life insurance, in fact, does get paid off. All right, and like I said earlier, one of the biggest things is figuring out how to move assets through your will to your heirs as tax efficient as possible. Trust will help with that. Anything that'll help us with stepped up basis will be a huge plus. That estate attorney will be able to help you very, very much in explaining what all this will mean and helping save a tremendous amount of time and money with structuring your assets correctly. Now, this is a very complicated step. We are not attorneys for estate attorneys. We are trained in this, but we're no tax attorneys. So we are trying to make sure that this part of your estate is set up very well, because it's such an, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of your financial plan. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. All right, so after all this is said and done, we're going to really boil this down to 5 recommendations. All right, so number 1, let's get an estate attorney on board immediately. I don't want to, if something terrible happened right now, the amount of pain that would be caused would be substantial. So we need to get on this right away. Number 2, let's get our insurance agent lined up. Let's talk to him about the long-term care insurance, the Medicare and Medicare Advantage options, the house policy that we talked about, and certainly, most importantly, an umbrella policy to make sure that you're covered. And your boat probably, by the way, was not mentioned, but that boat is also a decent asset, and boat accidents happen all the time. That's a great opportunity there to make sure that gets covered as well. Convert your 401ks and 403bs. We talked about that as well. Your CDs, tell us where those are, and we'll figure out what the penalty is, and if there is a penalty, if they are in fact beyond the FDIC insurance limit. And then you're going to have to sit down and have a serious discussion about what you want to do with your stamp. The stamp is such a fantastic, important, I believe, a family heirloom that you may never sell it. Or if you do, maybe it'll get to charity, where, again, a trust could be set up to handle something like that. The options with your stamp are just substantial. And I think if you think this through and talk with your attorney, I think we'll be able to put together a pretty interesting plan that will be great for your family and make you feel better about how you take care of this. So that was a lot of stuff. I'm hoping that you got something out of this. There's a lot more detail in here, so if you want to review the plan and look at it and have questions for me, I'm going to suggest that we get back together probably in a couple weeks. I'm going to really recommend, though, you get with an estate attorney first. Let's get those documents and thoughts going. He or she will have very important things to say. And once we have an idea of where he or she wants to go with you, then I think we can get together and start filling this plan and moving into a more specific direction. So if that all makes sense, I really appreciate your time, and I hope this is helpful for you, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.